at a later date. Okay. Just a quick moment here. All right. Believe we alive. Okay. Spotlight both of us. Right. Okay, I want to welcome everybody again to the platform for Wisdom for Life and Leadership. My name is Shay Ola. I am the curator and founder of this platform, and we are always excited to bring content like this to you all. And on this particular day, we have our wonderful guest, Ashley Lockley, was here with us, speaking about mental health, the church, and everything that matters in this world right now. Not to put that pressure on her, but we need to talk. And if you have been watching the news and watching what's going on in the world, we do need some mental health pause and really helping us kind of think through some things critically. Ashley, welcome to the platform, and great seeing you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And for those of you who don't know, Ashley was our first guest on this platform some years ago, and so we're glad to bring her back. A lot has happened in the world since she was last here, and she's our resident therapist, if I could say that, to help us navigate the craziness of the world around us today, and just so much going on in our world. And as we were looking at this particular month, which is, I believe, the 10th of this month, is part of a mental health awareness day, and really helping people demystify the whole um, stigma around mental health, especially in the church and beyond, and especially communities of color as well. We have some challenges around that and the stigma around mental health. But the beauty of bringing Ashley on the platform today is really because she can speak from both aisles, but from the secular context as well as the sacred context. As someone who is, you're in your doctoral program right now, almost done. We about to call you Dr. Ashley. Luckily,
In
so,
Jesus' name, keep me in prayer,
come
Pastor.
on, we didn't. You know what I'm saying? We believe. So on the flyer, I was very tempted to put doc. I said, shall I put? I was like, you know what? Okay, let's let. So
We are standing. We're believing. It's almost done.
yes, you're almost done. Yeah,
Almost done.
yes. And so it's tremendous to have you on, and to really kind of help us think through some of these things today. Um and also, you are also a minister the gospel. You are a mom, a wife, so you wear so many hats that I think many people can relate to, you know, today in our world. And I think there's so much angst, in just both the social, economic realities of the United States and the world at large. And people are looking for answers. They're looking for answers. Some people obviously in their word praying, for but at the same time, like, okay, what else is there? How do I have peace of mind? How do I elevate where I'm at for my family and for the people that God has called me to? And I'm glad that you are here today to kind of help us with some of those some of that journey. I think one of the things that I want to really help people unlock today is kind of helping them think through how do you find wholeness um, in this time? How do you maintain um, health? You know, the Bible says that He wishes that we will be in good health, even as our mind prospers. And so I'm hoping that we're able to unpack some of that today as we look through some of the things that we see in our world up today. The conversation that I had with someone recently around mental health was a little bit troubling. Um, Feeling like they didn't really have options, they didn't really know where to go, they didn't really know what the resources are, and if they felt like if they reached out to maybe like a pastor, that they would be ridiculed, or they would, be shamed out of their church community. And that breaks my heart to hear things like that, because that is not God's heart for us. Um, and I believe God wants us to really have a place where people can be centered in Him and also be able to find community to think through the things that God has that for them and their family to be able to prosper. And so I'm really excited to have you here, because I think this is an important conversation that we should have. But with that setting, I just want to tell the people a little bit about you, and I'll pass it back to you, because I know you could talk more about yourself. But we like to give our people flowers, right? We like to give people flowers on this platform. Again, if you're watching this, this is the Wisdom for Life and Leadership platform, where we seek to ascertain the wisdom of God both in the secular and the sacred place. And this is an important part of our focus around mental health, having spiritual health, physical health, but mental health is such a central piece of that we quite often ignore. Um, Ashley Lockley is a passionate health um, and wellness educator, consultant, and advocate who graduated from Penn State University in a bachelor's degree in accounting. So she's a multifaceted woman. Dallas Theological Seminary graduate certificate in biblical and theological studies. Liberty University, Masters of Arts in Professional Counseling. Ashley is currently a doctoral student, almost done. And we're claiming that for her in marriage and family therapy program at Eastern University. Great school, by the way. Being here in the PA area, definitely know of the school. She launched her mental health awareness brand or program called Mastering Mind Matters in December 2018. And I think it was around the time we were bringing you on, probably to the platform was prior to the pandemic, which was a lot for a lot of people in during that time. And through your work, you've been able to address mental health issues and stigmas around it, especially in faith-based communities, which is such a big area. And your work obviously spans being an author, caring for young people, and bringing. You've written two books for kids, and we'll let you plug that in a little bit during the event as well. I think it's really great. But I think what I love about you is being a stigma breaker, helping people walk through that. And there's so much that you have done. And one of your work, and I had the opportunity to minister at your church, and your dad, and you come from a family of, people of God, and your father being a minister, and also for yourself as well, and your brother. Um, then in your church, as a minister, you've also kind of centered this as part of your ministry in the community. And so one of the things that we do see with Ashley here is a minister here at Macedonia Baptist Church in Southeast Washington, D.C., which exercises her gift in teaching and a heart for proclaiming God's word with compassion and with understanding. You're also a mom of two, and your husband as well. I saw a post recently telling telling us that your husband doesn't like to take pictures. So I do follow you on social media. And
Yeah,
so
he's so
but
under.
yeah. Don't worry, we'll get him when we come to DC. We gotta come see y'all. So
That's
next,
right. That's right. We'll get
yeah,
him.
so we gotta come see you. So Ashley, luckily, welcome to the platform.
Thank
We and
you.
we love you so much. Thank you for bringing a lot of this to place. I want to start with this question. What and this is typically not the order I would ask the question, but I just wanted to ask right away. What drove you or what made you start your platform for to be an advocate? And obviously you studied it in school, but in 2018, I don't think anybody forecasted that we would have the pandemic. How so apropos your platform was created at that time and your practice. How were you called into that in 2018?
So it started before 2018.
Okay, so
So, well, Mastering Mind Matters as like the official kind of, oh, this is what
well,
we're
yeah,
doing with
got it.
2018. But um, my story begins as a child, grew up in church. So I'm a pastor's kid, a PK. My dad started pastoring when I was 15, but we been in church my whole life. My mother, my one of my favorite stories to tell is that my mom went into labor with me teaching vacation Bible school. And so like when I say I'm a church baby, like church baby. And even though that was the case, it didn't shield me from feeling the heaviness of life even as a child. And even into my teenage years. And so by the time I was 13, I was experiencing consistent symptoms of depression. What I came to know as even feeling anxious, but there was no way for me to have the language around it at that time. And so when I was 13 years old, I attempted suicide. And of course, when my parents found out, abundantly concerned, just wanting to make sure that I have what I need. And so the response was less, well, the response wasn't merely just, let's pray about it, let's, cast this out. It was also like, what do we need to give to Ashley by way of resources to ensure that she's okay? And so while I didn't start therapy immediately, it was my parents really tried to make sure that they were in a place where they were consistently kind of checking in and, really making sure that they were tending to what it is that I needed. Fast forward to college, which was the first time that I started seeing a therapist because, again, went away to college, went to Penn State, and I was just so depressed that at first I was just sleeping all the time. I was missing classes, like my sleep schedule was just all over the place. I had picked up the freshman 35. Um, they used to call it the freshman 15. Now it's more like freshman 30, 35. But I picked up a bit of weight and I just was just existing. Now, I was
Mm,
able to go to Penn State on a full tuition scholarship, but because I was so depressed, I was missing classes. I ended up losing my scholarship, which
wow.
was a significant, like, oh my goodness, I just knew life was over at that point.
Mm,
Um, and so I knew I needed to do something. So, as most universities here in the United States have, they have like a counseling center. So decided
mm,
to go there, started therapy, started with some antidepressants, which was a whole nother thing because it's like, am I broken because I need this help?
mm,
Do I not trust God enough? So there was the extra layer of, you're a Christian, you're supposed to be a person of faith.
mm,
Why are you needing to go to a therapist? Why are you needing antidepressants?
mm,
And so that personal experience with just having to navigate depression, having to navigate anxiety, and also navigating chronic suicidality.
mm,
While that attempt when I was 13 was the only attempt I've done, I have over the years had different seasons where I've dealt with suicidal ideation, and I've had to really figure out, okay, what are my mental health needs at this particular point. And so I like to lay that out as the foundation because it really does drive why I, have come to focus, and why I've, really leaned into tending to one's mental health as such a huge part of how we are to show up in the earth, you know, as part of the abundant life that God promises us. Like, it's
Mhm.
not disconnected from our spiritual health, it's not disconnected from our physical health. It is a part of all of that. And you quoted 3rd John 1 2, which is one of my go-to's, that we should be in good health even as our soul, right, our very souls are prospering. And so understanding that all of who we are, including our brains and how our brains kind of process things, um all of that is important to one, us being able to just be before we can do. And so, part of my purpose, especially with Mastering Mind Matters, is to get people of faith to use all of the tools
Yeah,
that God has given us.
but well,
Yeah.
very well said. I thank you for taking us through that because I think it's important to lay that groundwork. In that also you answer the question as part of your upbringing and kind of your journey through here. And for those of you guys that didn't have the opportunity, you can watch the first video we did with Ashley some years back, kind of laying some of that groundwork as well. I think it's important for us to kind of fit it all in the tapestry of her story and what she's doing today, because I think it's critical, and I think it's really, really important. I will say this, that I think many people struggle with depression,
Hmm.
and there are different ways people, for those who grew up in church, sometimes it's said maybe it's a demon, maybe it's maybe you don't lack of faith, maybe it is because maybe you're not resting, that could be the case as well. But there's a lot of different reasons that people give for depression. And anyway, especially when we start talking about suicidal ideations, that takes a different kind of like framing from the church. And then I'm going to kind of come back to that in a moment, because I think we want to dismiss some myths that we have in the church around what is spiritual, what is just our brains kind of doing what it's doing. Is there a bridge between those two things at times? I think those are important for us to also discuss, to help people diagnose and walk through those places. And then also too, I think also there's a divorce between how we understand physical health and mental health. So like where we have more grace for the remedies within the medical field for physical ailments,
Right.
whereas when we talk about mental health, we're like, no, it's just, we need to just only apply the Bible or whatever our faith constructs are to address those as well, but not understanding there are things that God has also made available even within psychological sciences, as well as therapy that can help us kind of address those, which is still the knowledge and the wisdom that God has also made available within the general society as well. But anyways, we can address that as well. Because I wanted to kind of, I didn't want to forget that. That's why I'm bringing that up, because I think that's such an important part of this conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, can you define for the average person who's listening to this,
Hmm.
what is mental health?
Well, I think biggest, the best way that I could define mental health is the ways in which our bodies process our experiences.
Okay.
Generally speaking, mental health, we think about, a lot of times we think about our bodies as our heads and then the rest of our body. But
Mm,
mental health though it does tend to show up through a lot of cognitive symptoms. So, like brain fog, lack of concentration, not being able to sleep, racing thoughts, things like that. Your mental health also has symptoms that show up throughout the rest of your body, right?
Mm,
So when someone is experiencing something like anxiety, right, their body is trying to process anxiety. One of the biggest symptoms, or one of the symptoms that we know we can link pretty
mm,
consistently to anxiety is, gastrointestinal issues. Your
mm.
stomach starts to hurt,
Stomach's been.
or you went to the bathroom, you're like, what is going on here? Your
Mm,
body is processing what's happening with your brain, what is taking in, and it's processed throughout your body, right?
mm,
So one of the things that I always try to remind people that is that mental health and physical health can't be dismissed from one another. So in the same way, there is evidence that our gut health, right? So what we take in by way of food affects 90% of what happens with our brain. So
wow.
there is a constant communication between our brain and the rest of our body through neurotransmitters, right? These are, hormones and things like that that travel back and forth between our brain and the rest of our body, right? That communicate certain things, that allows us to feel certain ways, that allows us to feel, dopamine, which is the body's reward system. So, something good happens, you're able to feel excited, you're able to feel great about it, right? That's dopamine.
Mm,
Serotonin, which is, the body's ability just to be able to exist in a way that is
mm,
able to kind of feel good generally, right? So mental health is, the way that our whole body kind of processes how we show up and what we experience. Now,
mm,
for some of us, our mental health, for a lot of us, most of us actually, our mental health will have, peaks and valleys, right? So there are some seasons where you might have better mental health because things are going well, you're feeling well loved, you're feeling well resourced, right? And the way that your body is experiencing life is more positive, so you would say that your mental health is better. And
mm,
then there are some seasons where your mental health may not be as great for a number of reasons. Things are
mm,
going crazy, right? So there is a general kind of, just like when we think about our physical health, some seasons we're a lot healthier, we in the gym, we eating right, we're doing those things. And
mm,
then some seasons where, we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not sleeping, we're not drinking our water, right? Our physical health will go down. It's the same thing with mental health. What I do want to say is that there is a difference between, and while it's really great that we're doing a lot more talking about mental health, it also has allowed for mental health to kind of become buzzwordy, in a sense where it's just like, oh, I'm just protecting my mental health. And it's like, are you really? Like, what are you actually doing, Um, so
mm.
along with that, things like depression, anxiety have become buzzwordy. If you feel sad, you say, oh, I'm just so depressed. Depression is not sadness, right?
Mm,
Sadness can be a symptom of depression, but depression is much more, it consists of a set of symptoms, right? And then when you think about clinical depression, which is depression that's not necessarily dependent upon the ups and downs of life, but it actually is the byproduct of, certain
chemical imbalance.
chemical
Mm,
kind of things happening with your brain. You have to take into consideration a set of symptoms, how long a person has been dealing with those set of symptoms, and what the impact has been, right?
your life.
Those three things go into what we've known as the clinical diagnoses, right? And so I'm just going to pull this out really quickly. You can tell I'm a therapist because I was able to pull it out
There you go.
right there.
That's the proof.
This is, this is how, generally speaking, uh,
Mm,
mental health diagnoses are diagnosed, right,
diagnosed.
through
Okay.
the DSM-5 TR. Um, and so through this is how we've come to figure out. what the symptoms are of different mental health diagnoses, what the symptoms are, how long it is affecting someone. So, if someone is experiencing some symptoms for like 3 days, often we'll say, well, maybe it's just, you're reacting to like the ups and downs of life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you're adjusting, right? So there's like a
Mm.
very basic kind of diagnosis that's called adjustment disorder, right? It's just like you're experiencing life and you need a little extra support, right? But if someone's been experiencing, a lack of sleep, lack of appetite, lack of, not wanting to do things that typically bring them joy or enjoyment or purpose, they're experiencing consistent brain fog, and it's been like this every day for the last 6 months, right? And it's
Mm.
gotten to the point where, they're about to lose their job because they haven't
They're not
shown
got
up
that
for work.
functioning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There we have symptoms. We have more than a couple of symptoms. We have a significant period of time, and then there's also an impact that really could destroy this person's sense of well-being, right? So that's where we get into the clinical diagnoses. And so, some of what I think I've been sitting with a little bit more is, you know with the introduction and with us talking more about mental health, it has normalized mental health in a certain sense, but it also has put us in a position where we are
Diluted.
utilizing terms that we absolutely do not understand.
Understand.
You know, we're quick. If someone is operating a way that we don't like, he's such a mental,
Yeah.
right?
I got my mental health. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like a buzzword. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you wash your hands after you do a couple of things. It's like, oh, I'm so OCD. It's like,
No.
there's a lot more that goes into it, right?
That's why that goes
Uh,
into it in
yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like I need us to, like, while I appreciate that we're talking more about it, we also, you know, want to operate in such a way that we're not simply having zeal with no wisdom, right?
Mm. There you
We're
go.
operating in such a way where we're not, acting as according to knowledge, right?
Mm.
So that is something that's really, really big. And, then on the church, the religious side of
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we sit up there and we say that we love the Bible so much, and we absolutely skip over that we have so many examples in those 66 books of ours
Mm-hmm.
of people who were struggling, right? They may not have had, the diagnoses that we have today, but we can look at their stories. One of my favorite to go to is First Kings 19, where Prophet
Mm-hmm.
Elijah just got finished doing
Running. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm.
right, and then he gets to a place and he's like, oh, you know what, Lord, it's
I
just
can
best
do it.
die. Let me just lay here and die. Okay. That's suicidal ideation. Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody's wanting to die. That's suicidal ideation. Right? So, like, and my favorite part of the story was that God was like, what I want you to sit here and I want you to eat this and I want you to go to sleep.
That's it. Yeah.
Because sometimes when a person doesn't need you to immediately go into, praying and speaking in tongues, you can still do those things, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is
Yeah.
not me saying that you can't do those things, but also sometimes people need you to bear witness,
Yes,
which
right.
which is what the Lord did. Elijah was like, "Oh my God, I'm the only one. I'm the only one.
I'm the only
Let me just,
one.
let me just die here, Lord,
Let
because
me
I'm the
just
only
die
one."
here now. Like, it's all over. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was, and it was big. It was big to him, and God
Yeah, it
acknowledged
was.
that
Yeah.
and was like, "You know what? Here, eat something and take a nap."
Take a nap. Yeah. You'll be
You
all
know
right.
what I mean? And so, like, tending to what it is that people need in real time, right? Then you can come behind once people have what it is that they need. Then you can come behind after a couple of verses down. God, once he got some rest and he was, then God said, "Okay, why are you here?" Like,
Mm,
then I can challenge you with, okay, this is what your experience is, but this is where you are. How did you get here? Right?
mm,
And so I think that we can do a much better job at holding multiple truths at the same
At the
time.
same time. Thank you. Well said. And the premise of my question is what you answered, because the um we've there's a we've commodified the language of mental health so much, is becoming like part of pop culture. To your point, it's great. People were talking about it. There's, less shame around it, but we don't know what it is. And I love that you address the whole, like, the commonplace of the ups and downs of life compared to an actual diagnosis that someone actually has. And a lot of people have those ups and downs in their lives. We all do. We live life, we go through life, and those things. And I think, thank you for bringing that clarity of that. And also, I think I love what you said about depression. It's not just sadness. Like, it's, I'm happy today, I'm sad tomorrow. Like, I'm depressed. We say I'm just depressed. I'm like, but to really like quantify what that actually means, duration of time going through this types of symptoms that we can track, that takes you out of your common routines, that take you into the place where you're not really functional anymore. I mean, for most part, I, there was some changes in my job recently, and one of my colleagues was going through some things, and they basically just were not able to, it really affected them deeply. Like, for the last 3 months, it just been kind of out of pocket. They have to even checking on them.
Mm-hmm.
At least for this person, they were wise enough to actually go get, start talking to their therapist a little bit more, because it impacted them in a deep way,
Yeah.
where you could tell, like, maybe there is something more. I mean, obviously, I don't want to slap a diagnosis on that, because I'm not, that's not my job. But
Right.
you could see this is something that is like, it's really taking them out, and it's been prolonged for a bit of time. And I don't know the history with
Right.
depression and things like. So those are the things that I think is very, very important for us to be able to kind of deal with, and think through it. And so thank you for kind of breaking that out for us and bringing out the book to show us, like, this is not just something we we take for granted. And yes, please show us again. She knows what she's talking about. The DSM.
This thing is thick. And
Oh my.
multiple editions. So as you can see, we're on the fifth edition.
Yeah, the fifth edition, and it's the
But
newest revision.
yeah, so there was the DSM-5. Now there's the TR,
Okay,
right?
okay, okay. The TR.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. There's another
So
level to it.
yeah. So and this is something that
Oh man.
it is reviewed as we know
Review
more,
that as we know more things. Yeah.
as we see things. There are things that we used to believe was, certain types of mental disorders or whatever that are no longer considered mental.
Classified as that. Yeah.
And then there are things that we're coming up, based upon
What
the
we're seeing in,
progression of society that now is being added. So absolutely, there's a lot that goes into
there's a
it.
lot that goes into it.
It's a
I'm,
good
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. Thank you so much for that. I think that for those of you that are listening to this live right now, or will be listening to this later, again, you're on the platform for Wisdom for Life and Leadership, and our guest today is Ashley Lockley, who is who is an expert and an advocate for mental health, and really is in a doctoral program right now, soon to be a doctor. And really helping us kind of navigate through this conversation. Ashley has been doing a lot of work, not just um, in in community, but in academia as well, because I think support is just well researched, and she's not just talking out of her something she read on Google and or read on social media. She's an expert in her field, and she's bringing a lot of expertise to us this morning, but with a lot of humanity and a lot of the Spirit of God upon what she's sharing with us as well today. One of the things the people we address on this platform are leaders, servant leaders that are here, that are walking through things, and I want to carry this conversation a little bit to kind of impact them and kind of walking through some things of around that. So many leaders carry the invisible or emotional and mental burdens of themselves and serving others, carrying a lot, whether you're a pastor, whether you're leading a company, whether you are have a business, you have employees and stuff like that. And from your experience, how can leaders recognize that they're emotionally drained? And what are the 4 steps they can take towards healing without feeling guilty or weak?
Yeah, that is a loaded question.
Yeah.
Even as me
Take it as
myself,
you will.
right? Even as me myself personally is
Okay.
trying to figure that out. But one of the things that I think a lot of leaders contend with is not understanding the difference between themselves and the work that they're called to do.
Mm.
There is a difference. Before God calls us to do, God calls us to be. And if we
Wow.
are busy focused on doing, um there are a couple of things that can happen. One, when we're not able to do anymore, then we cease knowing who we are, right?
Wow.
So if what we do ends up being who we are, then if we're in a place where we're not able to do it for whatever reason, then we're struggling even more.
Mm.
So it is, I think, a byproduct of the societies that we live in today, where there really isn't, um if you're not, if you're not achieving certain things, if you're not getting things done, right? I'm speaking from a very Americanized context where,
Mm.
the whole function of capitalism is literally your
Yeah.
productivity, right? And I can imagine like those who are joining us, by way of Nigeria also,
Mm.
have certain ways in which the society kind of props up our productivity as, evidence that we are who we say that we are. And so for leaders, the first thing that I would recommend is doing the work to actually know who you are, aside
Mm.
from what it is that you do, aside from the roles, right? So when you read my bio, you read a lot. I'm this, I'm that, I'm a wife, I'm
Mhm.
a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a minister, I'm a therapist, I'm a whole lot of things. And what I've been challenging myself to do when people ask me who Ashley is to not name any of those things,
Mm.
because ultimately those are roles that I play. Those are things that I do. Those are ways in which I show up for others.
Wow.
But if you were to ask me who Ashley is, I'm going to try to go inside and see, okay, what are the things that are core values for me, right? Being a person of integrity, being a person who operates with a very strong sense of ministry of presence, right? When things are happening with people, I'm good for showing up and being a listening ear and not feeling like I have to overtalk the moment,
Mm.
right? Those are things that are important to me, right? And those are things that are important to how I am made. So
Mm.
if I have a strong sense of who I am, then when I am not operating in such a way that who I am is, constantly being prioritized, then I'm going to notice,
Mm.
right? So if I'm finding it hard to, or I see myself starting to operate with less integrity, I'm going to tend to notice it if I know who I am. If I don't know who I am, there's going to be no way for me to recognize if I'm not functioning up to the standard that I should be, because there is no standard to begin with.
Mm.
So, recognizing who one is outside of what we do, I think is a really big important, and also, not being afraid of boundaries. Um and this is more from, I think, the spiritual aspect, because I think a lot of spiritual leaders, the ways in which we are expected to show up for people is like, when people need us, they call us, they expect us to show up, but we're not really feel like, we don't feel often that we're at liberty to say no, or at liberty to say like, hey, I've got this going on,
Yeah.
and
Boundaries.
I need to prioritize this right now instead of that. And so, what does it say about us that we believe that we can function in such a way, whereas we feel like we have to be God instead of letting God be God?
Mm.
Like, how does that work, right? Like, we're called to be the hands and feet of Christ, yes,
Mhm.
but ultimately we are not Christ. Like,
Mm.
we just don't have the reach, right? We're not perfect. We're not divinely, powered to function in all ways as all things. That is not what God called us to do. So being clear about who we are, and being clear about then what we are called to do is essential to knowing how we can function in ways that are much better. Um, Many of us use our positions of leadership and our callings as a way to escape,
Mm.
as a way to not have to deal with the hard things concerning ourselves. And so, again, if I'm using my purpose as escapism, I'm not going to have a good, pulse on if I am then operating in such a way that I'm running myself ragged and running myself into the ground. So how do you get to know that, right? I'm a big surprise, surprise. I'm a proponent for therapy.
Mm.
Like in therapy, those are the kinds of things that we're working to understand, right? We're working to get you to a place where you are able to understand your view of yourself, your view of others, your view of the world, right?
Mm.
um what is it that what was your experience in childhood, right? What was the thing that created what we call your internal working model, which is, how you learn to talk to yourself, how you learn to think about yourself. All of that matters. I know
Mm.
we like to pretend like it doesn't, but it all matters. So
Mm.
not only am I a therapist, I am a marriage and family therapist because
Mm.
I truly believe in the systemic thinking of, where you come from, the family that you come from, the environment in which you come from has a huge impact on how you end up showing up in the world.
Mm.
And if you have not been in a place where you have had space to contend with all of that and how that ended up kind of coming together
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
form where you are, you're going to find yourself in these cycles, right? And then you're just like, I don't know how I keep ending up here. I don't know how I keep burning out.
Mm.
Well, maybe in your family of origin, you were taught to believe that if you don't do something, everything will fall apart, right? And if that is the message, one of the messages that you got from your family of origin, then we have to unpack that,
Mm.
right? We have to be in a position to do that. And so that is a big part of why I chose to specifically be a marriage and family therapist, because of the systemic part. We can talk about an individual, but to divorce an individual from their environment and from their formative experiences, you miss out on so much. So that's what I would say, in addition to therapy, or if you're not ready to be, to do the therapy route, there are ways in which you can ground yourself, so making sure that you have an established routine that, where you're kind of able to sit in silence, right? If you find yourself not being in a place where you're able to sit silently and just kind of be in a state where you can meditate, or where you can just kind of be,
Mm.
that's a point that
That's a
says,
red flag.
yeah, you're needing noise, and you're using what it is that you're doing as a way to escape, right? So if you don't want to do the therapy route, finding ways to sit with yourself, finding ways to be grounded, right? Whether that's through, reading the word of God, excuse me, prayer, um, you know, being able to journal, doing, there are certain kind of grounding activities where it allows you to really be very in tune with what's happening in your body, what you're feeling in your body, right? There are a number of ways that you can kind of become attuned if therapy is not something that you like. Actually, I mean, you saying some good stuff, but I ain't ready for that. That's cool, right? I call myself the person who I like to normalize therapy for people.
There you go.
I use myself as an example. People are like,
Mhm.
"Oh, Ashley, how do you do it?" Jesus in therapy
Mm.
and them Zoloffs that I'm taking every day, because right. So like I have no problem with throwing myself out there, because people see
Mhm.
me as someone who is high powered and doing a whole bunch of things. Like you said, you name the laundry list, right?
Mhm.
But literally the way that I do that,
It's the
Jesus,
balance. Yeah.
therapy, and them antidepressants that I'm taking, because that is what I need in this
Mhm.
season, and I'm not afraid of that being the case.
No, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I think for for our leaders that are hearing this, and I mean, what you just said there is so important, because from the perspective of like, you are not your job, right? You're not your titles.
Mhm.
And to your point, productivity is a god we worship, quote unquote, in our world.
Mhm.
And it's not only unique to America. It's obviously the capitalistic mindset is it's invaded the whole world, and so everybody has a form of that in their own culture. And all of us live in different performative cultures as well. Maybe in the east, far east, and parts of Africa, it's performative, culture within maybe expectation of family, legacy, and the things that are put on people.
Yeah.
And or the ability to be noted in your society or to be seen in a certain way.
Mhm.
um we have the honor shame culture that is also within, you see more within, like science said, cultures outside of the United States. And so there's a lot of that kind of puts pressure on people in different ways. And just to your point to how we're raised, and I think it's important for everybody to unpack that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we, especially for those, let me speak to some of my 1.5 and 2.0 generation folks coming from other countries leaving the
Mhm.
United States. I
Mhm.
think sometimes, here's the myth that some of us were taught. Americans are mentally weak.
Yes.
We come from the other country. We're strong. We're immigrants. We're this, we're that. And we don't deal with any of those things that those people deal with, because they're just weak-minded people, and they have everything in their comfort. And here's what happens to most of us as we stay in this country longer and a period of time. And then you actually, in a way, sometimes become a quasi therapist to your parents, because then some of their traumas start showing up as they get older.
Mhm.
They're away from the home country. Even when they go back to the home country is also evolving. So
Mhm.
whatever version of the home country they brought to the present country, things are changing in those places. And there's this cognitive dissonance that they experience
Yes.
within, like, what they experience coming up, their own trauma,
Yes.
and then their kids are picking it up like, why, mom, why do you do this? Why do you hoard this? Why do you say
Mhm.
these things? Why do you act? And it just like the way life kind of reverses. When children are younger, they're much vulnerable, and as you get older, the same begins to happen.
Yeah.
And for different reasons, why older people also begin to lose some of their inhibitions, right?
Mhm.
Some of that's because maybe mental decline. There's a lot of things that can add to that. So you begin to see those gaps. And what I've been finding in a lot of our families, that they don't believe in any therapy. You start to see like, oh my gosh, my parents have a lot of problems. And then you start self-reflecting and say, oh my God, what, why, the way I was taught was toxic. Like, and not to, we love our parents, and if and I we have older folks that listen to this as well. So we want to send love. I'm not casting any aspersions on like the
Not
generation
at
that's
all.
older, but
Not
we're
at all.
getting better over time, and that's what we're finding. And so we're seeing that even people coming from other cultures having to unpack and even encouraging their parents to go to therapy,
Mhm.
because things become so dysfunctional in their parent with their parents. They
Mhm.
were like, you need to go talk to somebody, because I'm not going to be your therapist.
Yes.
Like and so some of you that are hearing this right now, you know what I'm saying. Like, we know those moments when our parents become so stubborn headed and, oh, we don't need therapy. And then we find out that, yeah, we need therapy. Even the ones that are living in Nigeria as well, because trauma doesn't just disappear. These
Right.
things get passed on, and it breaks my heart because we pass those trauma on as normalized behavior into our culture to create more dysfunction.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so I think also too, what we're finding now too is that in even places like Nigeria has some of the largest Christian population on the African continent. And
Mhm.
even outside of that, we're very religious people. We love God.
Mhm.
But, the whole concept of therapy is become a little bit more normalized even within the church,
Yeah.
that there's more room for that, especially with the younger generation. Older generations still kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But
That's nice for y'all.
yeah, that's just not for you. But we're realizing that we need to walk through this, and even pastoral training now, realizing that, okay, maybe people might not go to a clinical psychologist or something like that, but they'll go to their pastor, and pastors having to get training to be able to help people, not just say this is what the Bible says, but like,
Mm.
yes, that's what the Bible says, biblical principles, but also really helping people walk through real life things, real life issues. And so I think what you said there is so important for us to demystify some of those things, especially even within amongst Christian leaders
Yeah, yeah,
that are carrying so much, and we celebrate the many hats you can wear and all the titles that you have, and you're empty inside,
yeah,
and you're trying to overcompensate for something that you never want to deal with, and face yourself in the mirror. It's like, I think someone was saying to me, it's like, well, if I die, if you drop dead tomorrow, God forbid, you can't take any of this with you first. And
yeah.
that work that you think is so important,
Somebody else can
yeah.
do it. Yeah,
Someone, yeah, that company is gonna find someone to replace you, and they're not gonna even miss it. Even if they send flowers to your house and they send someone to your funeral, that's about it. So you
that's
kill yourself, not
yeah,
having balance and all that. And so thank you for saying that to our
yeah,
people. You are not your job.
yeah.
Um, if you cannot sit in the silence and find a place of meditation with God, a place where you can journal, be with your thoughts without music playing in the background, and social media, some kind of type of noise. And I'm also guilty of that. I'm not sitting here trying to, but we all have that because we're overstimulated
Yeah,
in, because my phone is like, you have your phone like, oh, I'm gonna look at this, I'm gonna look at
constantly
that, let me
going.
see what, what this person is saying, this person is saying, and this podcast and that thing. It's like, where do we have the moment to kind of just get away from that? We try to take walks with the family more, the
Mm-hmm.
kids. When
That's
we at
right.
the dinner table, like trying to go away from the phones,
Mm-hmm.
and just try to have those moments where we can kind of cleanse and reflect, and then also going to, just if anybody's hearing this, even as someone who's on this platform, I'm an advocate of going to therapy
Mm-hmm.
periodically. Like, now some people need to do more work,
Yeah.
right? But Ronke and I have been married close to 20 years. I can't believe that. About 18 years now, 19 next year.
Oh my God.
And we were just saying, like we were just saying that just the importance of going, we go periodically just to kind of fine tune,
Check up.
find language. And
That's
okay,
right.
we're parents now. This different, like when
Yeah.
you knew us in the early days, we didn't have kids then. Now you
Right.
got 3 kids, and career, work, and life is much busy. So how do you find a balance, and making sure the main thing is the main thing at the end of the day, and having that. So that, thank you so much for saying that. I think for our leaders hearing this, because I think that's such a critical point that you brought up with us.
Yeah.
I want to say something around the same concept of breaking the stigma that we have um around mental health and mental illness, and things of that nature. Um, Speaking about mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
um, one of the challenges that we deal with in the church in helping people and diagnosing the challenges that you see. I had a situation where, and I wish my mom is a registered nurse, and she was talking about something. We knew someone that struggled with some type of like bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
This is back years ago when I was a younger kid in Nigeria, and um, no amount of prayer, no amount of whatever was going to. It wasn't because of lack of prayer. Let's just put it that way. It wasn't
Yeah.
because people didn't really care. We just they dealt with it. But I remember my mom was like, well, it seemed like anytime she was not off her medications, it it resulted in that. And she was always an advocate for, like, some people just need to be on medication, like
True.
that, because the brain just doing something else. And we have another friend recently that we saw that she lost her marriage, she lost her kids because of mental health issues that would came about after a postpartum
Yes.
delivery. And you pop, that, and maybe those things were there before, but obviously it escalated at the time.
Mm.
And you could just see her life just being played out in front of all of everyone on social media. She's kind of losing grasp with everything. And the state has to get involved and things have to happen. And in our culture, especially this is, Nigerians now we're talking about, maybe other people from other parts of the world, people are like, "Ah, why doesn't someone just tell," in the African Nigeria, why doesn't someone talk to that girl? Where is her mother? Why
Yeah.
would you just tell her not to do that anymore? Like she's
Right.
disgracing her family in front of everybody. And and my mom was saying to me, it's like it would have been great if someone could get her the help she needs, not just like she's disgracing herself, which is typically the first reaction, the honor
Right.
shame thing,
Right.
but to say like this is more of what, it's not just a demon, right? It's
Mhm.
something it's not working in the chemical balance, and that's not translating to her reality. And so how do we help?
Yeah.
What is, without going down this, what is spiritual? I didn't want to just say demons. What is spiritual, and what is just, chemical imbalance in someone's brain? Or is there a place where those two things meet? Because we get that a lot. Oh, that's just a demon, or that's just a spirit. They just need prayer, and God is sovereign, and God can do anything. I'm not trying to put a limit on God, but then how do we decipher what is spiritually in something that is spiritually inspired, and something that is just physiology of the mind, and the chemical imbalance on the brain?
Yeah. Ooh.
I don't
Ooh.
know. That's
So I think a couple of things, right? And I say this as a person who has been the I I was on the receiving end of someone's schizophrenic hallucination.
mm, mm,
Um and this was a person who was attending our church,
wow.
um that I've had to navigate that,
Mm,
where the person literally would start to have auditory hallucinations in
oh wow.
service.
Oh wow.
Um, and for those of us who have more charismatic forms of worship, um, you know, there is one there is this need we feel like there's this need for us to like delineate between what's spiritual, what's actually like a psychological thing, and that has its own purpose. But I think the better question is, what are the ways in which this person is being impacted by all of those different things? And what by that I mean, it is possible for someone to have a mental health diagnosis and be under spiritual oppression, right?
Mm,
So when if someone is experiencing something, you all start praying, right? If it's something that is simply spiritual, you will see the results in that moment oftentimes, right?
mm,
You'll start to see things changing, shifting in that moment oftentimes. But if someone is, going through like a psychotic break, someone's having, hallucinations,
hallucinations. Mm,
things like that, um, it is not something that would be immediately kind of you don't really start to see much of a change in that moment. So I think the bigger thing is, one, the church becoming much more comfortable. And I think we lean to the, oh, it's a demon, oh, it's this, because that's what is
that's
comfortable
what we,
for
yeah,
us,
oriented. Yeah.
right?
Mm,
It's a lot more comfortable for us to say, oh, someone is under demon possession, than to say, that someone may actually be in a position where, like you said, they need medication in order to be able to manage and maintain their mental
mm,
health. There's a lot that we don't know, right? And there's a
mm,
lot that's scary about thinking about, people having, again, hallucinations. You can have auditory hallucinations, meaning things that you hear. You can have visual hallucinations, things that you see. Like there's a whole conundrum. And so, um, I'm trying to think of a way to make sure that I'm remaining respectful to the this person, we have a member of our congregation who has a mental health
Mm,
diagnosis. We are aware that she has a mental health
yeah.
diagnosis. She is on medication,
Okay.
but also there are some Sundays she comes in and she's already in a heightened state of anxiety.
I
Um,
see.
and she's already, she may, that Sunday she may be convinced that, this person or that person in the church is going to seriously hurt her. And so, while the saints will pray for her, I'm sitting there and I'm tending to what is actually happening with her as
Um,
far as her brain is concerned. I'm doing grounding exercises with her to help kind of bring her back down, bring her to
mm,
where she can at least, because again, when someone is experiencing especially something of the psychological, um the psychological symptoms, and they really are experiencing some type of mental distress, talking to that person, talking at that person, they're not processing any of it, because often they're in this heightened state of anxiety, and they're also, their brains are not processing in a way that makes sense, right?
mm,
So you can say, or you can ask them, oh, do you think that I would hurt you? Asking someone who's dealing with, hallucinatory thoughts, whether or not you believe that they would hurt you, like you would hurt them. In that moment, they may not be able to tell the difference. They may not be able to say, oh, yes, I know that's you. I can trust you. In that moment, you may
mm.
be the person that they believe, you know what I mean? So,
No, I
like, I
heard them.
think
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of times, like, you know, it, I think the the reason why we lean more into the demon possession thing is because it allows us to say, okay, this is something that can be quickly addressed.
Address.
It doesn't lend itself to it being a process, right? That, oh no, you may have to be under doctor's care for the rest of your life. You may need to be on medication for the rest of your life. You may have to have your medications tweaked here and there because,
Mm,
while they were working well in the beginning, they may not work as
okay.
well in at some point. And so we don't want to sit with the discomfort that that may be the thing, right? So for us, it's like, oh, we pray, we cast out the demon goes, and woo, and I think that that's where our comfortability is. And what we are having more opportunities to do is sit with that we have a God of process.
Mm,
We really, a lot of the ways in which and I hope I'm not coming off as disrespectful, but I think a lot of the ways in which we hold our faith is that, we do things so that God can respond immediately in the moment. And a lot of what we see as evidence in our sacred text is that God oftentimes uses process.
mm.
God oftentimes uses process to form us into the likeness of his son. Right? Like we know the scriptures, but oftentimes
Vacation.
we're wanting to see, it's like with Jesus with the demoniac, where he was just like, leave them, and they just jumped into the, again, you know what I mean? Like, again,
Mhm.
right? There, even though there was an immediacy in that story, that man still had to go back among those people who knew him as one thing, right?
Yeah.
And he had to learn the new normal of,
Mhm.
not being possessed, right, by those spirits. Like, there is a process to all of it. So even if it is something that is spiritual, you might see something in the moment, but you also have to set up something. You have to set up a system in order for a person to, one, be supported, right? And so also, if it is some type of spiritual oppression, we know that there are times when the spiritual oppression can come back, and it can come back a lot worse, right?
Mhm.
So again, if we're thinking about the ways in which we can, one, be more educated, definitely, getting our information from reputable,
Reputable sources. Yeah,
so yeah, yeah,
yeah.
reputable, right? Reputable sources, getting trained. There are things like mental health first aid, which um again, I'm speaking from an Americanized standpoint. I know it's
Mhm.
something that it is a training that's available in the United States. They have the adult American first aid, mental health first aid, and the youth mental health first aid, which basically trains your average Joe, normal person to one, how to see the signs of mental distress and how to, really work to address it in the moment so you can get that person from where they are to getting them to someone who can help them in a more in-depth manner, right? Like, so what are things, there are things that we have normalized. And this is what kind of came to mind when you're talking about, your experience as, the 1.5, 2.0 generation. But one of my favorite pastimes is to watch Nollywood movies. My husband, like, that is like my like guilty pleasure because they're just so good and dramatic. I just love it, right? But one of the things that I think about often when I watch these movies, because usually there's like this really like big dramatic mother figure that's like, like
Yep.
working to like, ensure that things go her way.
Yeah.
But the normalized behavior is control, but the
Hmm.
actual function of the control is to manage anxiety,
Mm.
right? And a lot of us would much rather be considered controlling than to be considered anxious.
Mm.
But that's what it is. It is anxiety, right? It's
Anxiety.
anxiety that is unchecked, right? It's, like, I'm afraid that if I am not able to, like have my hands on all these different things are going to fall apart. And when things fall apart, this means this about me. This means this about my family, right? Going into the honor shame thing. But at the root of it, it's anxiety, right? And so,
Mm.
being in a place where we're better educated, better trained, right? And also being okay with, if something happens, somebody can be praying and somebody can also be calling, for,
Yeah.
if a person is in a place where they're needing crisis intervention, someone can be on the phone with crisis intervention too. We can do all of the things, right? When that
Mm.
that member, when she has her moments, the saints get to praying and I'm sitting there doing grounding exercises with her next to her, and the Saints don't know what I'm doing, but they know I'm a
That
therapist. So
yeah,
that
yeah,
so they
yeah.
so they know, okay, well, Ashley's doing Ashley's thing, whatever it is. So we're using all of the tools. We don't have to treat these things as if it's one and or the other. Like, we don't have to bifurcate the way that we typically do. And so that's usually what this could be its own episode,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's
yeah.
usually my short answer, right? Like, we don't need to bifurcate, right? But we also need to just be mindful that whether it's something spiritual, whether it's something that is actually psychological, we can do both. We can tend to this to the psychological impact, because it is, even if it's a spiritual thing, it's going to have a psychological impact. And we can also tend to the spiritual. We can do
Yeah.
both.
I love that. First Timothy chapter 5 verse 23 says, as Paul addressed Timothy, it says, stop drinking water only, use a little bit of wine because of your stomach and
Mhm.
your frequent illness.
Yeah.
So that's Paul that raised someone from the dead, that
Yeah.
healed the sick, giving practical advice
Yeah.
to his spiritual son Timothy. You would say, like, why didn't just Paul just send,
Right.
his handkerchief
Right.
over there and just heal him,
Let's throw
but
some
no,
water on them.
even
Let's do it.
yeah, let's just do it. But he's giving him practical, like, look, stop just drinking water. I need you to do something else to kind of help you. And he says scripture says frequent illness, so that this is something that he wasn't prayed away. I'm sure Paul tried to pray it away. It's like, okay, boy, you go into something practical,
Hmm.
right, to get you through this, right? And there's so much wisdom when we look at the scriptures and just what you kind of to buttress the point that you're making today. It's not many times it's not just either or. We can do both at the same time. I do believe that when we see when our bodies are broken at times or things are happening, the enemy is an opportunist, and
Hmm.
so there are places where, because of the brokenness, because of the fallen nature of the world, the brokenness that we see in the world, some things are hereditary, some things that come down just from your genes that's causing this in your life, not because you did anything wrong, just because just the way the world is. And the enemy obviously is always looking for ways to oppress us more. And
Yeah.
so I do see that at times. And it could be sometimes maybe something you've done, some activities maybe that opened you up, maybe messed up, maybe you used drugs when you were younger, messed up the chemical balance in your brain, and that's kind of causing you. Sometimes it has nothing to do with that. It's just stuff that is just happening in a broken world, and that you find. But I think regardless of that is not to just limit God, because even the wisdom
Yeah.
that is provided in medicine, which I would also include to mental medicine as well as physical medicine, is from God. It's not something that came from the devil, as people would like to kind of maybe say at times. But I think within that, we giving ourselves the room to demystify that these things are, if we people run to the doctors. And I know even within certain church traditions where they don't trust doctors, they don't do blood transfusion. We look at them like, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
you're
Right.
putting people's life at risk. And I think when it comes to mental health, I think for us, I think it's important to also kind of be looking at that from that perspective as well. But I think that's a good call out from your end to kind of helping us kind of see maybe the right framing of it is not like one or the other. If you're still seeing things, and I love what you said too, because I think that's why we have people like you come on the platform, not just someone who's speaking just from a purely circular perspective. You understand the church world, and kind of sometimes the tension there, right? Like, yeah, we believe that God can heal. Yes. And we believe that God can heal in multiple ways, or help maintain our health, wholeness in multiple ways. Maybe another way to kind of put it. And so, for instance, if someone is diabetic, right, for instance, right, you could pray.
Absolutely.
God can bring healing, but you probably still have to maintain some type of like dietary discipline,
Yeah.
right? We got to keep it real. Like,
Yeah.
if you got high blood pressure in your family and you didn't pray about it a few times and it didn't go away, maybe it's the premise of First Timothy 5 verse 23. I think that the ways that God brings wholeness and healing into our lives, not limiting that just to like some instantaneous, like, I can't wait on it, it's got to go now. Sometimes some things is processed. Some things is going to be processed for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But that's what God has called us to on this side of glory. When we get over there, everything is great, everything as the scripture tells us. But here, there's some things that happen instantaneously, some things that happen in process, the things that happen that we have to hold as culture in our lives or habits in our life to help us maintain that type of place. And so it's those are things I know in Christendom at times, especially for those of us who come from charismatic backgrounds, and from I speak for myself, you just think like, man, we just gonna lay hands on it and it's all gonna disappear. And it doesn't always work like that. And then for those, maybe sometimes for folks that come from maybe non-charismatic backgrounds at times, I know the challenge at times is maybe, and I'm going to be an equal opportunity offender here, but it's like, well, I don't think prayer has a place in this. It's strictly like medicine. And I think also you're limiting God in that as well. That
Yeah.
there's a place where we can hold those two things,
Absolutely.
that God can heal, we can pray in faith, but also have actions
Yes.
that help us sustain wholeness
Yes.
in our lives as a whole. That God is not just a genie in a bottle,
Yes.
like,
Not Santa Claus.
yeah, God's not a genie bottle. I'm on the financial side of things professionally, and it's obviously by vocation as a pastor as well. And we talk to people about finances all the time. Well, if you abuse your credit cards, God's not going to wipe out your debt. And if you're not doing certain things, but can God provide for you? Yes. Can God provide you with a job and a business idea that can help you? But if you're mismanaging your funds, God is not going to come save you. Like that, those are principles that God would not override because of your indiscipline, or whatever that might be. Or if you live in an oppressive society where opportunities are being ripped from a group of people, at times, again, we'll have to see how can we help those groups of people overcome that in an evil system that is limiting them from achieving what God has for them as well. So there's ways I think we can exert justice in our own personal lives as well in the lives of others around us. And so thank you for bringing that for us. And I know that was a cheap way to say, is it a demon or is it a, obviously I know it's not it's a
No,
demon,
no, no.
but
It's
that's
no.
was
It's
an important
yeah.
conversation.
It's a question. Like you said, it could be its own,
It
thing.
could be his own.
There's
It could,
people we know
it-
like are certain markers for spiritual oppression, but it mimics, symptoms that we see of serious mental illness. So, uh,
you can't just say like, oh yeah, yeah.
there's a lot,
There's a
right?
lot.
There's a lot. There's um just use this as a quick example. I'm just going to
Yeah.
nerd out really quickly. There's more growing research around what's known as dissociative identity disorder, and
Mm,
the specifically for a disorder like that where people tend to dissociate, um, and the really the parallels between that and spiritual oppression, right? And how like the symptoms of DID really can look like spiritual oppression and vice versa.
mm,
And so, what do we do? What do we
mm.
do when we have people who are dealing with these things and it's not a cut and dry, oh, yeah, that's spiritual, that's psychological, right? So, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
I'll come back and we'll
We'll
nerd out
come back. We'll come back and unpack that some more.
as
So I want to get a little bit more in the latter part or half of the session. We're almost done here.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit more practical. The every day-to-day person who's out there managing their families, working through different things, relationally, in the world full of demands, constant demands of productivity. We talked about it in presence. Your mental health requires rest and reflection. Again, how can people cultivate a wise rhythms, right, and allow them to lead effectively without burning out? And I think you touched on that earlier, but if you can give us maybe some concise, steps that we can imbibe for ourselves.
I think that the answer to that becomes more and more complicated just with the more that we're seeing as far as like the systemic things, again speaking from a very Americanized standpoint, but just the
Mhm.
systemic um oppression, the systemic inequities, right? Inequalities. And there are some ways in which you can outrun system inequities, right? There's some ways in which people losing their jobs, people not knowing, my household is affected by the current government shutdown.
Mm,
There's some things, you can't outrun that, right? But what you can do is, one, be in a space where you're willing to acknowledge that the things that you experience on a day-to-day basis, they're meant for you to go through them.
mm,
So many of us spend a lot of our time just trying to, again, engage in a form of escapism, um,
wow.
trying to engage in, just trying to navigate around difficult things. And what ends up happening for a lot of us, and we get so used to just trying to navigate around those things that eventually, you know, it ends up having a bigger impact on us because we have suppressed so much and
Mm,
have avoided so much that we believe that our bodies are these inexhaustible kind of containers for all of our life experiences, and that's just not how it happens. So a lot of us start to experience, things like constant headaches and, not being able to control certain things, not being able to control our tempers, and a lot of
mm,
times we just, oh, you just, you got a spirit of anger, we will spiritize everything, everything is spirit. It's the spirit of depression, the spirit of anger. It's like, no, actually, you're angry because you don't ever deal with what you're experiencing.
wow.
And if for if I can, from a cultural standpoint, there's more and more research that shows that particularly in Black men, particularly in Black women, anger and irritability are symptoms of anxiety unchecked, are symptoms
Wow.
of depression. right? And the ways in which it shows up for us, because we're not allowed to, those symptoms that other people might get more sympathy for, may get room for. We don't,
We
we're
don't
not
get
allowed.
that. Yeah.
We don't get room for that for one reason or another. We tend to be less resourced on average. So, I can't just take off a day of work, and not be able to feed my
Provide.
family and provide for my family. So, I stuff down, stuff down, stuff down. The one way that I can get some things out of my system is to be angry, is to
Mm.
to
Mash out.
engage in certain vices, right? So a lot of the ways in which we talk about people being able to process things is, one, being in a place where you understand that you have the permission to actually sit with whatever it is that you're dealing with the way that you need to sit with it. And I know that's hard because a lot of us are socialized with, like, you ain't got time to do it and nobody cares. Let's just be very honest. A lot of us are, and I'm speak specifically for the men,
That's true.
y'all are told nobody listen,
Nobody listening. Yeah, you better
get
go
it
get
done,
at it.
and nobody cares, right? And so, if you're convinced that nobody cares, then you're not going to be apt to hold space for yourself.
Yeah.
You're not going to be apt to, really be checking in with yourself on at how you are actually doing. And then you look up and, like you said, you got high blood pressure, and you're on the verge of type 2 diabetes, and, you got all these things that are happening in your body because your body is carrying things. There's a very popular book by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score. And
Mm.
it's literally what we know, like the experiences that happen to us, whether good, bad, indifferent, our body is going to remember those things.
That's right.
And our
Keep a
body
register
is
of it.
going, yeah. And so our body gives us reminders and signs oftentimes before our mind even has the chance to be like, oh, you know what today is? Today is the day that my mama passed. Your body, a week before, your body's going to be like, hello, hello, hello.
Mm.
Something's coming up that was really impactful for you. You still ain't dealt with it. You still ain't processed. You still haven't grieved this, right? And so my dissertation work, praise the Lord, we're going to just touch and agree
Yes,
that
we're gonna do it. It's gonna happen.
is around the idea of lament, which lament is both a psychological and a theological term.
Mm.
But the work of Walter Brueggemann, who great theologian who passed earlier this year, he did a lot of work on the theology of lament. And one of the things that I loved about his, what he was able to discover about the theology of lament is that lament allows us the space to name injustice, and not just name it, but to name it to God. We
Mm.
got over a third of the book of Psalms that are Psalms of lament, meaning like David, Asaph, whoever was writing those Psalms were like, Lord, it feels like you are dragging me across the coals all day long. Right. Like they're just
Mm.
like, Lord, this is not, I don't understand this. Like you are sending my enemies and they're multiplying by the second, like
Mm.
where you're able to not just he called it contestation. It's not that you're just saying, oh, this is what's happening to me. You're directing your your experience, your sense of injustice, your I don't get this doesn't make sense, and you're directing it to God. And a lot of us have been, socialized to believe, hey, listen, don't talk to God in your type of way. And
Mm.
I still have that, like I ain't gonna go too far, but the way that my life has been saved is because I can say, hey God, like,
What's going on? Mm.
you know, the way that my life was saved after my miscarriage was like to say, hey, why would you do that after I had a cancer scare?
Mhm.
And then why would you bless me to have a child just to take it? Like I had to actually say what it
With
is
that,
that I'm
yeah.
contending with, right? Because there's no way. I just said it. I had a client right before I got on here, and I said this to her. I said, when we base our trust on our ability to avoid, when we're no longer able to avoid, then
Mm.
what is the root of the trust then? If
Yeah.
my ability to trust God is because I'm always avoiding the hard things and I'm just talking to him about the good things, when the good things go away, what is left?
What do
What
I have?
relationship is there left? Right.
Mm,
If I trust somebody, I'm trusting them not just with the good, but I'm also trusting them with the bad. I'm learning that through marriage, right?
mm.
Like, when you first meet somebody, you like, oh yeah, you should you putting your best foot forward. You just said you've been you and Rocket coming up on almost 20. I cannot believe y'all been married almost 20 years. Anyway, y'all coming up on almost 20 years, at the beginning, y'all, oh yeah, hey,
Yeah,
how you
yeah,
doing?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But almost 20 years, y'all didn't seen,
Everything.
seen the good, the bad, the ugly,
Yeah.
and the trust has been built in. We cannot avoid the certain experiences. We've had to walk through those experiences together. We've learned that our trust has to be built on a comprehensive understanding of who each other are. And it's the same thing with God. If we are putting ourselves in a position where we're only talking to God in hushed tones as if God is this very fragile kind of understanding or being, right? And we are not able to say, yo, God, like it really feels like you hate me because why would you let me go through this?
Mm.
Like I'm really struggling with that. God is not up there like, oh my goodness, Ashley, to hell you go. No. Like we really hold like God is waiting for an opportunity to throw us into hell when really God is waiting for the opportunity to prove God's self.
Come
God
on now.
is waiting for the opportunity to prove God's self, and
Come on.
God can do that even through lament. And so that's
Mm.
where a lot of my doctoral work is like not just understanding, yeah, we know that there are psychological impacts to lament, but how does the theological, because that's where the God part comes in.
That's the God part. Yeah, I
God
love
part
that.
comes in, right? So thank God for a program that does integration work. Praise the
Come
Lord.
on, between the two.
Um, but
Yeah.
but that's where the God part comes in. How can us having a space where we're actually truly able to lament by way of, like our theological understanding, how does that help to build our actual psychological well-being, right?
Mm,
Because it does. If we're
mm.
able to get ourselves to a place, it Brueggemann called it the plea to praise movement. If I'm able to tell God exactly where I am and exactly how I'm feeling, is eventually going to lead to praise because once I've got everything off my chest, I'm able to sit back and say, okay, I feel like this, but God can still be trusted.
Yeah.
And why can God still be trusted? I'm then able to access Lamentations 3. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope, right? I have to recall. I'm able to actually recall after I've been able to process what's going on,
Mm.
right? So there is a progression that we see if we're willing to engage God
Kids,
in a
God.
way where God is not so fragile that God cannot hold the totality of
The
our life.
challenge of us. Yeah. I love that. Thank you for helping us kind of work through that because I think a book comes to mind, Emotionally Healthy Spiritually by
Yes, Peace Cazero. Yes.
Cicero. A
Yeah.
great book. I read that a little bit back, and I had it in my my library, and I was just thinking about. I always recommend people, but again, it's just it's so important for us to have that balance and being able to bring the laments to God as we're contending with those things, and not just kind of say, well, God doesn't care about that, right? But God cares about, and He's not scared of our challenges and that. And thank you so much for that. What advice would you have for parents that are and young people, parents of younger kids that are walking through mental health challenges, especially in a social media age where there's cyberbullying, there's a lot of things kind of happening. How do we help our kids maintain mental health in this crazy world that we find ourselves? A quick I from time to time I read research from Barna Group, and for those who don't know, Barna does a lot of great research from the Christian worldview, but they're real researchers, by the way. So, but and they put out some good stuff. Says like 40% of all U.S. adults and 34% of all practicing Christians say that they have anxiety and depression that impacts most of their relationships. right? So we do see that, in different quarters. Another research from them that says that from Barna Group in 2024, like just last year, says that 39% of all Gen Zers say they frequently feel uncertain about their future, with an equal number of reporting anxiety about important decisions, and this is more than double the rate of frequent uncertainty and anxiety among boomers and elders, which is probably risen about another 16%. So kind of what's going on there? How do we, for let's just starting with the parents themselves, in terms of their relationships, but also looking at parents, at the kids, how do we help with mental health at this time, which you could see it's growing. It's such a big issue.
So I think a big part of um it, they're talking about they frame it as like a pandemic of loneliness.
Mm,
Have um a generation of children and youth and adolescents who are more connected in certain ways, but are absolutely not experiencing the depths of community.
mm,
So just because I'm exposed to a lot of people, like a lot of the engagement on social media is not for the sake of being social, it's for the sake of being liked, so that it's constantly kind of producing in them or cultivating within them this need to constantly be taken in certain ways, and and evaluating themselves and the importance of themselves based on how popular they can become, right? And that's why we have people doing crazy outrageous things, putting themselves in harm's way just to be able to go viral or whatever the case may be. So I want to go back to the depths of community.
mm,
I do have a 14-year-old, almost 15-year-old. He's a freshman in high school, and he's predisposed to be a loner.
mm,
He really does kind of keep to himself. He's a big gamer, so I try to honor that. Like, my husband's a gamer too, so it's just like, okay, let me try.
that's what
But
the
also, there are ways in which I still challenge him to um, engage in greater ways. So,
mm,
we signed him up for, there's a local mentoring program that gets him involved with other people, increases his social network, puts him in a position where he's having to talk to people and engage in things like problem solving and planning, and cultivating the leadership in him. So it can be very hard to kind of balance it out a little bit more, to get our children to a place where they're being challenged to do things that are healthy for them, but also that they're not feeling, maybe a little differently from our generation, where we had parents that was like, you going to do this, and there really wasn't no consideration about what it is that I felt. I love you, mom and dad.
uh, you,
I'm a
you just do
millennial,
no,
like
it's just
I am
we
just
just do whatever we tell you to do, and that's it. There's no feelings in
you
here.
just get, yeah, just get it done, right? And so I think a lot of our generation and like Gen X, we kind of tried to overcorrect certain things that,
Yeah.
as far as our experiences in parenting, in some ways we're finding out that we're needing to balance it out a little bit.
Mm,
So it's okay to allow your child to kind of explore and figure out what their own purpose is, but boundaries are always good, right? You um there's a lot of talk about this whole, gentle parenting thing, and I think people misunderstand what gentle parenting is.
gentle bad.
A lot of us are like, my parents weren't gentle. I mean, and like, yeah, could they have been a little bit more attentive? Absolutely, right? Let's not take
Yeah.
that away. But what I think a lot of people are missing about the idea of gentle or conscious parenting is that, yeah, are we like, bucking up against the idea of like knocking your kid on the floor for not doing something? Yeah, like, do you have to do that? You don't have to do that, but it doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah.
It doesn't mean that you don't have expectations, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for action or inaction,
Actions. That's
right?
right.
And so, like, a lot of, and I guess I can speak to this a little bit more now that I'm a parent. A lot of the anxiety, the angst that we feel about parenting is, you know, we're trying to parent our children the way that we wish we were parented instead of parenting our kids the way they need to actually be parented.
Wow.
I'm not a gamer, so that don't I,
That
I
don't
don't
resonate
know.
with you.
So for me to try to, tell Romeo, oh, you can't be on the game, it's like,
Hmm.
and that makes sense. Now, does he have boundaries on that game? Absolutely. After a certain period of time, I'm like, hey, son, get up and take a walk.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, come
Yeah,
on.
take a walk. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Move your body, right? Disengage, right? Today, you sure you can veg out. Tomorrow, we're doing something very intentional together after church, right? And
Right.
so again, balance, right?
Mm,
Is one of the things that, and I think a lot of times people miss about parenting is that, just like many other things, while there are common experiences, parenting is unique to you and your child, even amongst your two children. Now, I'm in a position where I have a toddler and a teenager. Y'all are not hard enough for me.
God bless you.
You're not praying hard enough. Okay.
No, no.
I have a toddler and a teenager, so I'm dealing with the teenager attitude and the
It's
toddler
not like yeah, yeah,
meltdown.
yeah. The
You
explosion.
know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and so, like, I think what helps me though is that I have to explain to my teenager the ways in which I have to be more hands on with my toddler because of my toddler's needs in that moment. Having to explain that to my teenager and having to explain that that doesn't change my love or my concern for my teenager
Mm,
helps to keep me grounded in, but you need to make sure that you are being there for him in the ways in which he needs you to be there for him.
mm.
That even if he acts like is like the worst thing possible to have a mom that kind of checks in, or whatever, when you don't do it, it matters.
It matters.
We may not say it, right? And so, a lot of us, we're, because if we come from a generation where our parents, maybe we wished our parents had thought a little bit more about our feelings, and then now we're too reactive. It's just like, like the other day I was speaking to my teenager, he was not responding, so I sterned up the tone of my voice, because
Yeah, we're not playing.
I mean, I'm talking, right? Like, when you come to me, you expect me to stop and pay
Yeah,
attention. So that respect goes both ways.
yeah.
He comes in and he's like, "Mom, do you love me?" And I was just like, "Yeah." Like, but why do you need to ask? I was like, "Are you asking because I talked to you in a sterner tone of voice?" He said,
Mm,
"Well, yeah, And I said, "Oh, okay, I get that." I said, "You want to know where the sternness came from? It's because mom was frustrated in that moment, right? And I had some options. I could have walked away, but in that moment, I wanted you to hear the
yeah.
frustration in my voice so
Mhm.
that you can understand that, right? So that you can identify with that. So, like, using what's happening, right? Using yourself, right? Because, as parents, we don't need to be the almighties in our kids' lives, right? My children will grow up knowing that they have a very imperfect mama.
Yeah,
My children also will grow up hearing their mother apologize to them,
that's right.
and so that's the way you break cycles,
Mm.
right? And I don't have to talk bad about my parents, but I love my parents. I'm super close with them, best friends, besties at this point, okay? Best friends, okay? But also, like, there are certain ways that I've decided that I am approaching parenting that's different than them, and then that
Mm.
in no way disrespects who they are.
Them, yeah. Mhm.
So, this also can too be its own session, but I think, one, being the healthiest version of yourself is probably the best thing that you can do for your child.
Wow,
Investing in yourself automatically invest in your future.
wow.
So if you don't hear anything else that I say, making sure that you have what you need in order to be healthy will automatically,
Translate, yeah. Mm.
you see what I'm saying? And I guess I could have said that 5 minutes ago, but yeah.
Nah, look, no, yeah. No, hey, that's fire right there, as they would say in this generation, and that is absolutely correct. Being, investing in yourself, being the best version of yourself is going to translate into the people around you in your relationships. If you're unhealthy, if you're stressed out, if you don't have any balance in your life, it's going to filter into your work, into your home life, into those things. If you're not carving out the time
Right.
it's going to show up. And man, there's no reflector of yourself when you have kids.
Right.
Kids don't do what you say, they do what they see you do. The verbal and the nonverbal, especially
Absolutely.
how you show up, is they feel that energy, they see that. And you just have to, God help me. I was telling Ron, I was like, man, God, like, like, and I thought I was patient and I had kids, and I was like, man, I don't have any patience for kids, like, and so you run into those things, and you just like, wow, realize how we need help from God and to really help us, and also to leaning into the resources that we have around us, reading those books, going to those classes, sometimes just kind of pick up new ideas. So every child is different. My oldest is different from my middle, from my baby, and it's like they're all different in temperament and in the way they look at life, and you're still trying to do the best to raise them the way God wants them to be raised. How My last question before I give you the floor, just to try to tell us anything else you want to share. This has been great. We got to have you back. As I said many years ago, hopefully it doesn't take this much time. Maybe we can bring you back next year, because I think we would like to probably have you come at least once a year just to kind of help us. And I know because there's new things in the field that we can learn from. So it's been a long time, but there's a lot going on. So this year, and a lot of things that are happening in the United States, they're also global news. So we live, would not to be American centric here, but a lot of things that happen in this country impacts the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
Uh, there is a lot going on, obviously, with the government.
Yeah.
A lot of anxiety that you live in the Washington D.C. So you see the impact of the shutdown, the quote unquote the militarization of DC and whatever is going on there. And I'm not going to go too much deep into that, but we all know what's going on in the headlines with that. Um how are people, I mean, in DC, being in the capital, a lot of what's going on here in that in the political kind of scene, and how that's impacting people with all the layoffs in the government, which also impacts many states around the country as well, not just DC. And then also within that also is some of the other issues that we've seen with, I guess, the assassination of Charlie Kirk,
Mhm.
and the greater conversation around the nature of politics in this nation,
Mhm.
and the tribal, I call it the tribal nature of the politics of America, because
Yeah.
it's not just, this is not politics anymore. It's very tribal in the way it comes off.
Yeah.
um how do we find balance in, I think you mentioned this earlier, how do we, it's like we're living through a time, how do you help people balance what they're reading in the news, whether it's Palestine and Israel and the Gaza situation? You take your pick.
Mhm.
There's enough in the world, on the world stage,
Yeah.
happening to us in real time that is causing a lot of anxiety and stress for people.
Yeah.
um as a parting question to you today, and for those who are listening,
Mhm.
and I feel like there might be more things, uncertainty in front of us,
Mhm. Yeah.
how do we navigate and still keep our mental sanity in the midst of this? And this might be a big question, but help us. You're the professional,
Yeah.
and bring to bear anything you think can help us in this time.
Yeah, it's definitely loaded. Again, I mentioned, my household is definitely impacted by the shutdown. My husband is a federal employee. I was a federal employee until October 3rd.
Wow.
So not even a month yet out of federal service. And
Wow.
it's a lot to carry. I can't even sit here and pretend like, like I didn't have a crash out this week. Like, oh my God, like
What am I
what's
gonna
happening?
do?
One of the things that I have been challenging myself is to uh engage in what I call is purposeful disengagement.
Mm.
Talked about this a little bit more, like, everything social media, you kind of miss the days. I remember people talk about like how back in the day, after a certain time, they would play the Star Spangled Banner and then the TV would go off.
TV, go shut up.
So, like you kind of miss, and then we
Yeah.
got into this 24-hour news cycle and we got into 24-hour programming. And now we are being left to our own devices as far as determining how to set boundaries when we have so much access, right? Like after a certain point, you don't need to read another news story. You don't need to, um, read another opinion about what's going on. You need to engage in what I call purposeful disengagement for the sake of keeping yourself grounded. I think the other thing to realize is that there's not one source that is unbiased, right? Care
Mm.
what it's talking about, there's going to be some level of bias, though we can acknowledge that some sources are way more biased than others,
And
right?
others.
So this is not saying that, just because they're all there are none of them are unbiased, that you take all of them the same. No. Some are very specific, that they are very biased. And they're very biased in certain ways, right? And so why do I bring that up? Because we tend to take in things that, of course, tend to align with our own views about things. And then we get something called confirmation bias, right? Where it's like, oh, I knew
Mm.
that. I knew that was what he was doing. I knew that, And so, I want us to consider when we're taking in, even from these news sources that are supposed to be unbiased, that there is a certain angle, right? There,
Slant, yeah.
people that own these companies that have their own views of the world, and so that's going to trickle down into how they report on what's happening in the world and how they frame certain things. I believe it was Malcolm X that said, if you're not careful, the newspaper, the media will have you loving the oppressor and hating the oppressed.
Hmm.
There are ways in which, and even, just as an example, with the upcoming cuts to SNAP, because of the government shutdown, there are a lot of people who are under the misconception that the people who need the SNAP benefits are all unemployed.
Yeah.
70% of people on SNAP are employed. They
Yeah.
are underemployed,
They're
meaning that
underemployed.
you have a national average as far as the national minimum wage is still at $7.25. I ain't made $7.25 an hour since I was 13 as a camp counselor. You know what I mean? Like there are people who having to live,
Adults. Yeah, they got, yeah.
adults with children and whole families
How
to
are they gonna make it?
that are having to live off of that. And then everything becomes politicized. And so I would say that, one, you want to make sure that even if you're feeding your spirit with all of these things, you got to make sure that there is something else that you're feeding your spirit with that can kind of help to buffer, right, the damage that comes, because after a certain point, you taking stuff in, you end up becoming callous, right? It does a thing where it kind of, it tends to decrease your empathy, decrease your ability to be able to see others as human beings, whether they share your identity or not, whether they share your belief system or not, right? And so, there is this mass kind of way in which, you know there are powers that be that are really working to get us to a place where we're really not able to be empathetic to other people's plights, right? And it's very intentional. So, you know taking a step back, ensuring that you're putting boundaries around your behavior, because again, boundaries are for you, right? A
Mm.
lot of times when we think about boundaries, we're like,
Somebody
"Eh,
else.
you're not going to treat me like that." Okay, so the boundary is that you have a certain way in which you want people to engage with you. You're responsible for upholding said boundary, not the other person, right? The
Wow.
other person is not responsible for your boundary. You are responsible for
For
your
your own
boundary.
boundaries. Mhm.
And so it's the same thing, if you didn't work the job and you done had to sit in traffic and then you come home and you having to deal with your kids, do you really need to scroll social media for an hour?
Yeah,
They
yeah.
are really neat. Like you just have to kind of like, is this something that I really need to do? And if I'm just itching to do something, is there something that actually is a little bit more regenerative?
Mm.
So I've gotten back into audiobooks.
Audiobooks.
So, like it's a way of me engaging with, because, I've been in school for so long, sitting down with an actual physical book.
Text, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's painful sometimes, and I hate that because I'm such a snob for actual books, as you can see. But my brain be fried at the end of the day. And so
Yeah.
like, I challenge myself a little bit more. Okay, back up from the social media.
Mm.
Let's get into an audiobook. Let's get into the word of God. Huh?
There you go.
Let's
That one, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you've got options, right? And so considering what might be helpful, that's what I mean by purposeful disengagement. It's not a sense of avoidance. You know that whatever the news is going to be there when you wake up the next morning. Things that happen, you won't be able to see it, you won't be able to hear it anyway, right? But constantly inundating yourself with all of the things, and again, it's there's a whole psychology behind it, right? But it really is meant to drive up, back to our Sesame Street word of the day, anxiety, right? Is to
Got
get
it.
us to be anxious so that we're operating in certain ways, right? So you can go to the store and buy up a whole bunch of food because with the SNAP benefits going away, everybody's going to be going buying food, right? When the pandemic hit, what's the first thing we did? Everybody went and bought up all the toilet paper, right? It was like, yeah, you had a toilet paper for a whole year because y'all went and bought a whole bunch of toilet paper. And there are people that needed toilet paper. Okay. So again, recognizing that there are ways in which, there's we have no friends
Mm.
when we think about the systems
Mm.
in our country, in our world. We have no friendship.
No
We
friends.
have no community amongst them.
Mm.
The community that we're called to is those who are in our families, in our local communities, our
Local
church
communities.
communities, right?
Mm.
Where we are very clear about how it is that we're operating, what it is that we're valuing, what is the ethic of care, right? That's where we have our friendship.
That's what our
That's where we
power is.
have our community.
Mm.
Tap into that. The systems will never be our friends. The systems will never care about us to the place that we need them to care about us. The systems will always be working for our productivity over our actual health. And so reminding ourselves of that is really important.
Wow. That the systems, not our friends. That's not community.
Yeah.
That's not what we rely on. The systems, the true community that God has placed us into, leaning into your community. On this video, we'll tag. There is a there is a teaching that I did on resilience. In the time of uncertainty, and I spoke about a little bit about finances and kind of how and leaning into our community was one of the main things. Like taking a page from Acts 2 and 3, and how the early church, relied on each other, shared the meals together, have those away because the world around it was hostile to them, and the
Yeah.
importance of like
With
leaning
all things
in.
in common.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was hostile, so they had to like they sell what they had in common. They shared what they had in common. Sorry, they sold what they had and shared what they had in common, and they broke bread together. They listened to the apostles' teaching and prayed, and so that was the communities, and I think that it's going to be critical in this hour more than ever before.
Yeah.
Leaning into your resources, leaning into the people, because when they cut off SNAP, when they take away Medicare and Medicaid,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you gonna go to? Where what are the resources that are available to your community, and stay connected, stay grounded. And that's the power of what God has as image bearers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And carry the imago Dei. How do we show up in the world, and how do we find other people that they can share in our humanity as we walk through life together, and to do that, because that's human beings are resilient. That's what I could say, even in the face of craziness, whether it's different levels of injustice in different society in this country, how Black people were able to survive for 400 years with
Right.
in the face of slavery, in the face of oppression, and in the face of Jim Crow laws and all kinds of craziness, and even today. And I think that is where the enemy tries to rip us away from family and rip us away from true community.
Yeah. And can I
And
even say this really
yes,
quickly?
ma'am.
Speaking as an African American, I also think that that's where the enemy tries to sow these seeds of discord between Africans and African Americans, right? There, these diaspora wars,
Oh yeah.
the, that's just like, y'all, honestly, they look at all of us the same.
FBI. They look at
Can I just say it how I feel
they
it?
don't care. Yeah.
I don't care.
They
We
don't
all
care.
was talking about, well, like, and it's
Uh,
ridiculous, and you hear the ridiculousness on both sides, and it's just like, y'all, like, they don't care about none of us. Okay, so what would be helpful, like you said, leaning into community and also not letting the enemy sow
so
seeds
it's source of
of
division.
discord.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Mhm.
division. So that's why I think it's just so wonderful that, like, Ronke, that's my girl. Okay, so we're working together. Like, that was never a thing for us.
Yeah. No,
The,
no.
the community, and even how you're still connecting to back home. And
Mm.
I pray that those who are watching from back home are just
Yeah,
do
no.
not have this crazy African Americans back on here. I am a little crazy, but I promise it's not like my parents
No,
better than
no.
that. But I do appreciate, just being able to have that connection too.
No, it's I think it's important because we find it the world is becoming much smaller
Yeah,
than ever before. There is um I always say there is this commonality in our struggle. It might look a little bit different in different countries and part of the world, but at the same time there's a lot to kind of lean in there. Whether I know, as you're saying, people that obviously call themselves FBAs, and if you want to call yourself ADOS, and then you have obviously Africans, immigrants that are here, and the migrated kind of assimilated into the culture, and maybe some that don't feel like they want to assimilate into the culture. You have people in the Caribbean, you have people in the UK, you have people in the motherland, and on the continent itself, and then we're working through that against systems that are not really, they were not created for us, and that are willing to tear us apart, and in many ways, and so I think the importance of it is like really understand that we've been created in God's image first, and understanding like some of the things that there's differences in some of our cultures, but there is also so much things that bring us together, and bind us together. When I look at even like, without getting all, historical political here, even looking at like even like Marcus Garvey and some of the underpinnings of his work in scripture, as well as how he saw African people, liberation, and the things that, and I think you definitely see, you definitely lean into that, and you see,
yeah,
wow, okay, there's a lot of things that bind us together, and the things as we're fighting against the system, which are what I like to call, the systems of this world
yeah,
that have been set up, to crush and to deceive and to draw people. And I think when we diverse ourselves from that, we begin to find true liberty. But
yeah,
when we get so invested in those and thinking that's the way we propagate ourselves, that's kind of where. And I think also too, even if I'm speaking of the body of Christ as a whole and large, even I think for this whole thing with Charlie Kirk that happened, a
mm,
watershed moment for the church. And I think two reactions that I see there, obviously, there are people that are going to look at that and say, well, this guy was like the epitome of Christendom. And some people are going to say, well, he's this and he's all that as well. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, the issue that I still have with the our association with politics, it's that it muddles the water. And so you're not able to, when you're able to be a prophetic voice in culture, you cannot do that because sometimes you're married to parties
hmm,
that ultimately can dumb down your voice in the way where it's supposed to be, so that I'm able to speak to power on both
yeah,
sides. So
yeah,
if the Democrats are acting crazy, and I can say things that needs to be said there. If Republicans are going over here and doing their own craziness, we can speak to that. But when the church is so married to particular political parties, you put yourself in a position where you cannot be the true prophetic voice you're supposed to be in culture,
yeah,
because of what you're married to power,
yeah,
and the propping up of empire. It's not kingdom, right?
that's it.
It's that's not what it is, and we conflate culture wars as spiritual warfare, and it's not that either.
Yeah,
And so there's all these confusions that we have, and that ultimately do that, and even like, without turning this into that political, without going too much in depth. But what I saw is that the enemy really kind of causing us to be divided and deceived. I think there is things in the house of faith that we need to accountability we need to have.
Yeah.
Real talk. Don't I'm not saying we sweep things under the rug and say,
Mhm.
if someone's calling themselves a Christian or person following Christ and have really, really bad ideologies about other bearers and think that people are subhuman and
Right.
or people that are not worth fighting for. There's a challenge there, and I don't know if we believe the same Jesus. Maybe you're claiming
Right.
that's real conversation to have,
Right.
but I think there is that challenge I had, and this is where it's hard not to, because when I saw a lot of what's happening, I was like, man, I don't want to deal with any of these people anymore. Like, I'm cutting them all off. Like, if you believe this way, and there was a lady that we knew, my Ronke and I knew, in central Pennsylvania, around, actually, she lives around like um UPenn,
Mhm.
not UPenn, Penn
Yeah.
State in
Mhm.
Colorado. And this person was a really, really strong MAGA
Mhm.
person. And to be honest with you, there was a video that I did recently with the person actually like a year ago. Disliked the video, was like, and I was like, well, I don't think they're rocking what, but I'm gonna speak truth anyways. You might not like it, is what it is. And I was shocked because the turning point for this person to kind of wake up to the deception of the hour
Mhm.
was this whole thing that happened with Charlie Kirk.
Oh wow.
And not even so much of his death, but the funeral.
Yeah.
And
The
yeah, the whole pageantry, and it just turned him, and the person was just telling me like, I I don't know if the Republican Party, and this person was saying, represents um Christendom the way I thought I was taught to believe.
Mhm.
And even to people in their family was like really shocked. They were like, what, you're not that anymore? And she's like, no, I don't think this represents, and it's not to speak just about the Republican Party, but just kind of as a commentary. And I'm just thinking about, like, I really like thought this person, yeah, they probably have their views. I don't think their views can ever change, but just to kind of even see the reality of like waking up to the reality of the kingdom and just saying like, man, this is what have I really even believed?
Mhm.
What have I been sold? What have I been brainwashed to believe? And to see that, and people struggling with some of these things, as we're looking in the world today, and that again, our trust is not in systems.
Yeah.
Our trust is not in what we see in this world, but our trust should be in God. Lean into the community of God that God places you in. People that are not disillusioned,
Yeah.
people that are trusting God, people that are really still going to the
Sober minded.
scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Sober
open
minded.
minded, going to the scriptures to guide him, and really looking at the whole counsel of God's word, not just like picking and
Right.
choosing what fits their whatever cultural narratives you want to push
Right.
at the moment in time. And that's really kind of where we have to continue to be, because that's whatever is coming in front of us, whatever uncertainties are in front of the world, that's the place we can really put our faith in, and put our faith in God. But I want to turn it back to you as we close this. I know we've spent almost over 2 hours on the podcast now, but this has been good.
It was a good time.
It's a
I
good time. It's a
appreciate it.
good
I
time. It's a
do.
good time. It's
I
a good
appreciate
time. It's a good time. What's your parting word for us today? Anything that you want us, our viewers to hear, listeners to take away with today? And then just plug your platform again for us, and for people that I always get people requests and say, can I, is there, I last time when you came, we have someone reach out to us saying like, does she can I reach out to her as a therapist? Can she help me? And can you just let us know your services and things that you have out there?
Sure. So, just thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I enjoyed the conversation. I always say it's always a great day to talk about mental health, and I truly believe that. So yes, I am a marriage and family therapist. I'm based in Maryland. I work virtually. The practice that I work with services 13 states in the United States. I can't tell you which one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you the website. It's inspiredandfree.com. And so if you reach out to them, um and you want to see if you can, book a consultation or book a session, you can let them know that you can request Ashley Lockley. Outside of that, I do, lots of psychoeducation to churches and helping. I do a lot of talking to people who are considering therapy. So if you got questions, if you're like, Ashley, I mean, I heard what you were saying, it was kind of cool, whatever, but I don't know if I'm ready. I'm the person who'd be like, yeah, let's talk. What are you still kind of trying to work through? So you can go to masteringmindmattersnow.org, and kind of see. Done a lot of I haven't done a lot of events lately because trying to trying to finish up a
Gonna
doctorate.
finish up that, yeah.
But you can get information. You can also get information about how to contact me there. So again, that's masteringmindmattersnow.org. And so I'm also on social media at Ash Lockley, at Mastering Mind Matters. Um, yeah, you can find me on all the things,
On all
but
the platforms.
yeah, all the platforms. But honestly, the biggest thing is like I take seriously like what I'm called to do, and so I'm very thankful for those of you, Pastor Shay, you being one who
Yeah.
really see the work that I do and honor that, honor the calling that's on my life. I don't take that for granted. I know that not everybody can accept me for being a woman, being a minister, being a therapist,
Yeah.
all of the things I
Yeah.
do come off. I carry a lot, but I'm just so grateful. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you on. For those again who are watching, this is Wisdom for Life and Leadership platform. And our guest today again was Miss Ashley Lockley, who's come to give us a lot of great insight and information about mental health, the church, our modern world. How do we thrive in it? She's a licensed therapist that's really bringing a lot of great content based in Maryland. And she's brought so much. So definitely go back and watch this. We're gonna obviously cut this up into clips and timestamp, a lot of the great conversation today. Thank you so much again for joining us. And she's written some great books as well for kids. And so what are your the children's book out there?
All right, I'm gonna grab one, I think. So the first one is Arden Learns the Right Lesson, and this is
Okay.
about a little girl who is experiencing some anxiety about attending school for the first time. So
Good.
really helpful for
Awesome.
those who are starting school. And
Awesome.
excuse me. The other one is called Two Best Buds for Romel. So I mentioned that I have a teenager. I'm a bonus mom, so I'm not biologically his mother.
Okay.
But this kind of is a little bit autobiographical about our learning each other and, ultimately building, oh, sorry, ultimately building our
Yeah.
relationship so that now I'm his mom. He calls me mom, and that's my son.
Right.
But it talks about just kind of that process of kind of blending families and all of the different things that can go into that, but for children.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's great what you're doing and the work that you're doing. We're so grateful for how God continues to cause you to flourish and helping many others in your calling and really helping people in their journey. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you for answering the call of God for over your life and helping so many others. And I hope that for those who've listened to this today, this has been really, really insightful and helping in our journey with God and all that we have. I'll read this particular scripture here from Psalms 42 verse 5. It says, "Why, my soul, art thou downcast? Why are you disturbed within me? Put your hope in God, for I will praise Him, my Savior and my God." And that's obviously um David writing that. And if you read the whole scripture, the whole verse, so your whole chapter in context, you see his own journey with God and his own soul and the challenge of depression and just walking through anxiety in life and still really looking back to God because the solutions that we need they're in God and that we ultimately, whether it is therapy, whether it's rest, whether it is, the things that we need for ourselves and the journey, whether it's prayer, all of it as solutions that God is making available to us to make the whole being healthy and whole. And so thank you for bringing balance and bringing your professional expertise and the word of God to us today. Again, thank you so much, Ashley.
Thank
Well,
you.
hope to have you back next time. Thanks.
Absolutely. Have a good
Thank
one.
you. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye now.